Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our program on the Clark County Charter Review and the proposed amendments that will be on the November ballot. I am Amy Scott, the Program Services Coordinator for the Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries. And I'll let you know that we'll take questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions in the middle, feel free to put them in chat and we will read them out when we get to the end. So you don't have to worry about forgetting them. And then at that time, you'll also be able to turn on your mic and ask questions as well. So right now I'd like to introduce Chuck Green and Kelsey Potter, who are both on the Charter Review Commission. Kelsey.
Thanks, Amy. Good evening, everyone. Chuck and I are here representing the Charter Review Commission. We both are representatives of District 2, and Chuck is also one of the co-chairs of our commission. So thank you for inviting us on behalf of the Charter Review Commission to speak tonight. We're going to be touching on the 7 charter amendment proposals that the Charter Review Commission put on the November ballot, and then we'll also be discussing briefly the 2 the County Council have decided to put on the ballot. So just a quick overview on the next slide of what we'll cover in this presentation. So topics we'll cover today will include a quick background on the charter and what it is, the 7 measures that the Charter Review Commission have placed on the November ballot, and a short summary of what the Clark County Council has decided to put on the ballot, which include 2 amendments. So first, we're going to give a little background on the charter itself. So what is the county charter? So the county's home rule charter provides a sort of mini constitution and provides for the structure and foundation of county government. So in 2014, the charter changed us from a commission style form of government to a county manager council form of government. And it also provided some new rights for citizens that were not in the previous form of government. So the Home Rule Charter was approved by 53.5% of Clark County voters in 2014. It went into effect on January 1st, 2015. And there were many changes to the structure of our county government and citizen participation and rights in this new form of government. So the charter essentially separated the policy functions from the administrative ones. The new branches under our current form of government are the legislative, which includes the county council, and then the executive, which includes the county manager and the county executive elected officials. The charter also directed the county council members not to interfere with staff in carrying out their administrative functions, but it continues to allow councilors to interact with constituents and, with the county manager approval, work with both the staff and the public to resolve citizen issues and complaints. So the 5-member county council consists of 4 elected council members by geographic district and 1 elected countywide position who serves as chair of the county council. And as we go along in our presentation, you'll see that one of our amendments is going to ask the voters if they would like to change that. Next slide. So what is a charter review? The charter review is a process in which the charter gets kind of re-looked at. And it consists of 15 members, 3 for each council position, and we have 1-year terms currently. This is another thing we're going to be putting, we've put on the ballot. They should be sitting on your kitchen table somewhere right now for voters to take a look at. So the Home Rule Charter spelled out the process by which the charter can be reviewed and amended. And we are members of the Charter Review Commission were elected in November 2020. And this is the first time the charter has ever been reviewed. And it's occurring 5 years after the charter went into place. From here onward, the current charter calls for reviews at least every 10 years. Our current terms are for 1 year or until our work is complete, whichever occurs sooner. And the charter also provides for an initiative style amendment request from the public, as we will show a little later. Amendments can also be proposed and submitted by the county council. All right. So first, we're going to talk about the 7 charter amendment measures that our commission placed on the November ballot. So under our current Clark County Charter, it requires all county executive elected positions. These include positions like the Assessor, Auditor, Clerk, Prosecuting Attorney, Sheriff, Treasurer, to run as partisan, meaning that a candidate must openly identify a political party preference when filing and running for that position, and that position is included on the ballot. So parentheses R or D behind it. Under the current charter, they can also choose no party preference. This amendment that the Charter Review Commission is putting before voters would amend the charter to make these county executive elected positions nonpartisan. So they would be listed under county nonpartisan offices on the ballot. And one thing we heard from constituents, the public during public comment and through some of our surveys was they wanted a separation between the executive county offices and the legislative component with the county council. They wanted us to separate those and have a voice on each group being partisan or nonpartisan. So just to give a little education on what these positions do, they're responsible for managing and overseeing state and federal laws for the county and all junior taxing districts, including tax assessments, election, court records, law enforcement, financial accounting, legal services, tax collection, etc. So a lot of folks were coming to us and saying these are more administrative positions. We would really like to have the option of voting for them as nonpartisan positions. So that is the language essentially you will see on your ballot. The question is, should the offices of the county assessor, auditor, clerk, prosecuting attorney, sheriff, and treasurer become nonpartisan? Next slide. So listening to all the feedback we got from folks on this, we went ahead and separated the county council positions from the executive elected positions. So currently the Clark County Charter designates the 5 county councilor offices to be partisan elected offices, meaning the same as the county executive positions. They must openly identify with a political party when filing and running. They currently have the option of no party preference, however. But this amendment would amend the charter to make the 5 county council offices nonpartisan. They too then would be listed, if this passes, under county nonpartisan offices on the ballot. To give a little background on what counselors do, they're responsible for adopting and overseeing county policies, acting on ordinances affecting county code, rules and procedures, managing and overseeing state and federal laws, creating a county vision and strategic plan. They approve the county budget. They can hire and fire the county manager. They fund public facilities. They authorize bill payments. They manage county property and other responsibilities. So definitely more legislative and policy making than the elected or the executive positions. So this ballot measure is also pretty straightforward on your ballot. It is simply asking, should the offices of county councilors become nonpartisan? So the voters could choose to keep both as partisan, or they could split these, one nonpartisan and keep the other partisan, or make both nonpartisan. So that's where we're at with these first 2 amendments. And I'm going to turn it over to Chuck to talk about the proposed amendments for the 5 district county council and redefining the council chair.
Thank you, Kelsey. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what this does. And then on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the background as to why it is on the ballot. And I will point out that on the actual ballot, it's a little confusing as to the wording, but this is basically would take the 5 council positions and have 5 district representatives under a rearrangement, reconfiguration of the current county council. It will not add positions. It will not subtract positions. There'll be 5 positions if this passes. So the amendment would replace the county chair position with a 5th district councilor, and I'll show you what that means, as well as revise the 4 district back to 5 districts, and I'll show you how that works. Revise the charter related to the council composition. As I mentioned, there will be 5 positions. There's 5 positions now, 5 positions if this passes. The council chair is one of the 5 positions. They are elected at large countywide now. Under this, the chair position would be elected by the 5 county councilors at the start of each year, similar to the process they used for over 100 years when we were run by a county commission. Because our Charter Review Commission positions are tied in somewhat to the council composition, this would change the composition of future Charter Review Commissions if it passes. On the left, you'll see a map of the current configuration. That's the 4 geographic districts. And then again, we have an at-large chair that serves countywide. They're elected countywide, they serve countywide. As you can see, the districts should be equal in population, but they're not. When the charter passed in 2014, these were equal in population. Since 2014, we've added over 50,000 people to Clark County. And a lot of the growth has occurred in the northwest part of the county, the north part of the county, and the east part of the county, which is why you see districts 2 and 4 have a rather significantly higher population than districts 1 and 3. So no matter what happens under this ballot measure, there's going to have to be a reconfiguration of those boundaries to balance the population in all 4 of the geographic districts. So as I mentioned, to get to the 5 districts, the county council chair as an elected position would be eliminated and reclassified to a District 5 representative. We are currently the only county in Washington State that elects the council chair. All the other counties elect their chair of the commission or council by the commissioners or councilors that sit on that council. So if it does pass this would take effect in January 1st, 2022. And there would be 5 districts. The ballot does include the boundary map that you see on the right. And as you can see, each of the 5 districts are balanced in terms of population. The other point I want to make here is that if you look on the left, each of the councilors represents as many as 138,000 people. Keep in mind the city of Vancouver has a little bit more, about 180,000 people. They have 7 people representing the entire city of Vancouver. In this case, we have 1 councilor representing almost as many people as are contained within the city of Vancouver. So the commission, in trying to get a better and balanced representation, decided that we would put on the ballot a 5 district composition, which would reduce rather substantially that per councilor population amount. And you can see on the right how much that gets reduced. The other thing I want to point out is that if you look at the geographies of the 4 districts on the left, the population base of the county is on the south. And that actually is reflected in the elected representation we now have. We have 5 councilors. We have 15 charter review commissioners. Every one of them, all 20, live south of 179th Street. So there's currently no elected representative who lives in North Clark County. So what District 5 would do is it would be a North Clark County district. It would guarantee the northern half of the geography of the county, as well as 20% of the population, that they would have a representative on county council. They would have in the future 3 representatives on the Charter Review Commission who live in their community. Amendment 4 would be changing the review frequency of the charter and the commissioner terms of the Charter Review Commission. Currently, we are elected for 1 year. Our terms will end December 31st, 2021. And from here on out, the charter calls for reviews every 10 years instead of 5. And what we're proposing, and the reason I bring up 5 is the charter did call for a first review after 5 years, and that's the review we're currently in. The proposed amendment would change that future frequency to also be every 5 years, and it would extend the length of terms of each of the charter review commissioners up to 2 years or until the work is completed, whichever occurs first. So if in the future, if this passes, charter review commissioners complete their work in 6 or 7 months, and they don't need 2 years, they can dissolve. They don't need to go the full 2 years. The reason this is on the ballot is because when we were looking at things, we were talking to people during each of our campaigns for running up to the election and after we got elected, talking to the communities in our various constituencies, we had quite a few potential amendments that would be placed on the ballot. And we realized that if this is after only 5 years, we've gained 50,000 people and the times have definitely changed, then waiting 10 years might be a little long for the next review. So this would change it to a 5-year review cycle and terms up to 2 years. The next amendment, which is 5, is to adopt an ethics code and an autonomous ethics review process. Currently, there is no formal code of ethics. There is a code of ethical conduct that the county councilors adopt under their periodic readoption of the rules of procedure. In other words, how they govern their meetings and how they run their meetings and govern themselves. But there is no code of ethics as it applies to all elected or appointed officials within the county. The other issue with the code of ethical conduct that's in the place now, anytime there's a complaint, it calls for a review committee of 2 sitting county councilors that would appoint a third non-councilor as the chair. Last year, we had multiple complaints that basically made trying to find 2 non-biased or non-complained against county councilors very difficult. It created a stalemate situation. So our proposal is to create that the council would pass a code of ethics by July 31st, 2022. And as part of that, set up an autonomous ethics review process that is independent of the county council. They would have appointed commissioners, and they would have an ethics oversight office and probably an officer that is a gatekeeper of the complaints. The ethics oversight office would also have a complaint hotline and process and review the ethics complaints. If this is, at least the understanding of this model would be similar to what Pierce County adopted in their charter a few years ago, which does have a code of ethics. It does have an independent review process. It's been successful, and we would look for the county council in adopting a code of ethics to call on maybe Pierce County's officials to get some guidance as to how they've set that up and how they've conducted business under that. But it is, in Pierce County, as in the case here, this would be an independent and autonomous ethics review process. Amendment 6 creates a diversity, equity, and inclusion office and commission within the county government. Right now, we don't have one at Clark County. We look around, City of Vancouver has a manager of a diversity, equity, and inclusion within the city manager's office. WC Vancouver, Clark College, are those, a couple of school districts have also appointed DEI officials. County does not have that. So what this would do is to, if it passes, the county manager will begin the process of establishing this new office of diversity, equity, and inclusion. and also establish a new commission on diversity, equity, and inclusion within a time frame. Now, the having a commission like this appointed by the county manager and confirmed by the county council is not new. One of my other hats, and I just completed a meeting on that earlier tonight, was I'm chair of the Commission on Aging. We are appointed by the county manager and confirmed by the county council. So this commission would be on par, but instead of focused on aging and aging in place like we are on that commission, this one would be focused on equal rights, equal opportunities, diversity, equity, and inclusion within county government, as well as externally with the services and programs that the county provides around the region. Amendment 7 is a technical cleanup. It does have, there have been some changes in state law. There have been some modifications or even additional definitions that have been brought in under state law, and the charter makes some mentions of those, either definitions or references to specific state laws. So to make things consistent with these changes in state law, we are proposing some minor corrections and clarifications to the charter to reflect those. I do want to point out that I've had a few conversations with people over the last couple of weeks about whether or not this is adding some additional definitions of protected classes that are not mentioned in state law. And I have pointed out to them that actually this makes it consistent with a change that the state legislature made last year in non-discrimination and definitions. So the part that's added in this amendment would just be making this consistent with that state definition change. The other part of this amendment is that it does tell the redistricting committee, which is about ready to get started, and we'll be looking next year at updating the county boundaries consistent with the 2020 census. In this case, it would tell the redistricting committee to avoid splitting of precincts when they redistrict the county. Now, I want to say redistrict in the case of if that 5-district proposal passes, that would be the starting point that that committee would work with. They would not be able to make wholesale changes because that map is what's part of that amendment, but they would be able to make minor modifications to those boundaries to make sure each of the 5 districts would be balanced in terms of population. Right now, we have a couple of precincts that are split by county council district boundaries, and that's a little difficult for the elections office figuring out whose backyard the line goes through and what precinct they should be voting in. I do want to talk quickly about the 2 county council amendments. The first one clarifies procedures for processing initiative, mini initiative, and referendum petitions. This does not change the percentage needed. It does not change the structure of how you do referendum, mini initiative, and initiatives. What it does do is clarify who this goes to, who reviews, the timelines for reviews, clarifies terms such as what a petition is, and specifies the deadlines when they're triggered. It also details procedures for the auditor as to how you verify and canvass the names of the legal voters on the petition to make sure that they are valid and they are currently registered voters. Number 9 is a change, and this would change who can file an initiative referendum based on the type of ordinance that is under consideration. If an ordinance only applies to the unincorporated area, this measure, if passed, would mean that those initiatives or referenda on those that only apply to the unincorporated area, only those voters in the unincorporated area could sign a petition, file a petition, and vote on a measure if it does make the ballot. There are some times where there's ordinances that the county council passes which take effect countywide. That would not change those procedures. There are some like the recent fireworks ordinances that only apply in the unincorporated area that would be an example of what would apply under this if passed. I do want to point out that it will not change who gets the vote on the charter or charter amendments. This is a Clark County Home Rule Charter, which applies countywide. And so any future amendments on the charter would be voted on countywide. With that, I'd like to thank you all for listening. And in the presentation, which we will be posting on our website tomorrow, we have a number of links as to how to get information. We have a lot of information on our website. Kelsey and I have also offered to follow up. If you have questions after this, feel free to get a hold of us. Email addresses are on our links, such as on this information card. So feel free to reach out, because we are here to provide information and answer questions. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and return it to Amy and see if we have any questions.
Thanks so much, Chuck and Kelsey. That was great, wonderful information. We do have some questions, and feel free to, if you have a question, you want to turn off your mic and let us know you have a question, or put it in the chat. But we'll start with this one. What is the background behind the nonpartisan measures? Why are there two of them instead of just one?
Kelsey can take this. I'll just launch it. Some of us, including myself, heard loud and clear from people last year as we were campaigning, and myself, I was dropping flyers door to door, and people actually answered their doors and we had a chat. But since then, we've heard very clearly that people would like to reduce the amount of negative politics and reduce how the effect of a political party has on how people serve in the county elected position. And so they asked very clearly that we put these on the ballot, or put something on the ballot, to turn these partisan positions into nonpartisan positions. That's the same thing, that it would show up on the ballot the same way our positions did last year, which is under county nonpartisan positions. Kelsey, what did you hear?
So when I was running for office, I reached out to some of the elected administrative positions, and I asked their take on it. And one response I got from one of them was having to run and pick a political party and have that letter behind his name often makes it difficult for him to reach out to his counterpart in another county to problem solve or troubleshoot on an issue, because he often felt like it was coming with some baggage associated with his political party if the counterpart associated with a different political party. And so he felt in their positions, which really aren't policy-making positions at all, it doesn't need to be a partisan position. It doesn't give the voters any more insight on how they're going to do their job, because they have very prescribed ways that they have to do their job. And so he felt it was a detriment to creating relationships with other elected officials. On the flip side, we got some public comment from folks who were very opposed to changing the county council to nonpartisan. One of their arguments was the county council is a policy-making group. And for those voters who may not want to take the time to really read between the lines, if people do switch to nonpartisan, it requires a lot more work and education on the voters' part. So his example was oftentimes Republicans aren't in favor of tax increases and Democrats are. I'm thinking of specific public comment. So when he votes a specific way down the ballot with whatever letters in that parentheses for what he thinks will be best for his issues. So we felt like these were two very different issues that voters needed to choose separately on. And I think I'm really glad that we did separate them, because I think they're very different positions and have very different functions, and voters should be able to weigh the pros and cons of making each partisan or making them nonpartisan if they so choose.
Yeah, and should point out that a number of the currently elected executive positions came to us in one of our meetings and very much supported having them split, for one, but they also made it clear that they feel that their work is administrative, executive, carrying out laws, not making them, and that things like elections, tax assessments, justice, and those other functions that they oversee are not really subject to partisan politics and should not be. And so that's where we separated the measures. I also want to point out that there's nothing that precludes or prevents any of these candidates from belonging to a political party or seeking endorsements from certain political parties. It's just how they show up on the ballot and how they file for the office to begin with.
Thank you. We have another question. Judy would like to see the district map again and see how the North County district is configured and how it aligns with 179th.
All right. Well, I can tell you it doesn't exactly line up with 179th, and that's because we formed this map consistent with state law and state law under redistricting. So we basically had to make the districts as compact as possible, as contiguous as possible. So in other words, no gerrymandering. Partisan politics cannot be considered, and population bases needed to be balanced. So as I mentioned, 27 years ago, on the map on the left, the charter, each one of these 4 districts had the same number of people. One on the right does that. Also, we started with a alternative that was considered by the freeholders back in 2014. They actually did consider a 5-district county council. And so we started with that map and basically worked with the county's GIS department as well as the auditor's office to work and make sure we weren't splitting precincts, make sure we weren't creating situations where the populations were very different. So it did take a few pieces of a few iterations, but this is how we ended up. So 179th is roughly this line. I don't know if you can see my cursor. And so there's a part of District 5 that would be south. It's still a rural area. That's south of 179th, but again, that's about the only way that we can balance the population between the 5 districts.
And then there's another question. And so Judy says, maybe this is not in your control, but why is there only one statement against a charter amendment in the voters pamphlet?
Well, we tried.
What outreach was there done to those on or off the Charter Review Commission to balance out statements?
Okay, so the process is when we adopted the resolutions, the elections office also requires us to identify up to 3 members of the statement for committee and up to 3 members of the statement against committee. All but one of our measures, we had unanimous support of the 7 amendments. Amendment 4, we had 1 commissioner who was opposed to it. So it was not difficult for us to select 3 representatives for the statements for committee on any of the 7 measures. The 1 commissioner who was opposed was the one that wrote statement against measure 4. We put out a press release before we took official action on the signing the resolution and sending it over to the elections office, asking for people to volunteer for the statement against committees. We received nobody. The elections office after we'd sent these over before August 3rd, when they were due, they put out a press release asking for people to sign up for the statement against committees. They received nobody. And so the cutoff date was August, I think August 8th, for these committees to have their rosters set so they could exchange statements for and statements against and any rebuttals. And that's just how it turned out. That's what you see in the voter pamphlet, the lack of people signing up for being against the measures.
Thank you. Let's see, let's go on to another question. What, if we vote to enact the 5-district county council, how does that work with no longer electing a chair? And won't we lose the ability to look at county issues on a county-wide level?
So I've been answering this question with kind of a comparison to the state legislature. We have 49 legislative districts. They elect a speaker, which would be the equivalent of a council chair. They do not have a statewide legislator. They don't have a statewide state senator. They have 49 districts, 98 representatives. So what this system would do is go back to the way that we did it for over 100 years here in Clark County and how everybody else does it in the state. And that is the 5 sitting county councilors would annually elect their chair and then annually appoint members to boards and commissions in which the county has representation. The other thing it does is the current charter requires that any of those boards or commissions like RTC or CTRAN, in which the county has 2 or more representatives, the county chair has to be one. That would, again, take it back to the way that was done before for over 100 years, where the council would appoint members to those various boards and commissions. So the county-wide representation is exactly how you get statewide representation at the legislature. You convene as a body and the council chair would facilitate the meetings. We would hope that whoever is represented in each of the 5 districts both represents their districts as well as discuss county-wide issues when they convene as a council.
And touching on that, though, I think it is important for voters to know, for good or for bad, currently you're voting for 2 county councilors. And if this passes, you are voting for 1. And I think that's just something to take in consideration when you are checking on this amendment.
Thank you. So why would the County Review Commission need 2 years to do their work? You're doing it in 1 year.
So you're talking to 2 people who actually opposed that 2-year, but that was the majority decision. We spent some time talking about that. The feeling that we have this year after the 5-year review, the first one, is we're feeling rushed because not only did we have a bunch of considerations early on, we've only put forward the top 7. There were several that several members of the commission felt we still need to consider maybe for next year's ballot, but we're running out of time if we're going to put those on next year's ballot because our terms end at the end of this year. So that's where that 2-year provision came in. The 5-year review cycle was because of what we're seeing is how much the county has grown, how much the times have changed, and trying to reflect all of those in these amendments. I do want to point out that the charter is a sound document. It works. There is nothing wrong with the charter. If none of these measures pass, the county will still function. It'll still function the way it does now. Now, there might be some people who think that it could function better, and that's what some of these amendments are attempting to do. But the charter works, and it will continue to work regardless of whether these measures pass or not.
And touching on that, I think there's kind of 2 philosophies on our review commission. You have the philosophy of what Chuck just said, the charter is a fine document. It just might need a few tweaks that we want to propose to voters. And then you kind of have a different camp who thinks that we should review a bunch of items every 5 years and bring that to the voters to decide if they want to tweak it even more. And so that camp was the one that was more of a proponent of the 5-year review cycle, 2-year terms, because that's their vision of how the charter review should move on in the future.
Okay, and so I think this this next question is kind of related. For future amendments dealing with population and redistricting, wouldn't it make sense to have the review processes tied to the census results and when they're available rather than using estimates?
And that's actually a really good question. I was asked that in an Identity Clark County forum that I was on last month. The concern, the issue is just the timing of our review cycle. Is that the calendar worked out that after 5 years, this is the year that we review it. Now, normally, if this weren't COVID, we'd have the census results and we'd be able to factor the census numbers into those districts. Well, we don't have that because of COVID delaying the census. The redistricting committee, it's my understanding that they are aware of the ballot measure. They are aware that if it passes, they will have the census numbers to be able to do some tweaks to those boundaries. We feel pretty confident that the 2020 estimates are pretty close because we get those from the State Office of Financial Management. The question that came to me, at least during the Identity Clark County Forum, was, what about future review? Why can't you just have an amendment that sets up your review cycles, especially if it involves districts, to happen in 10 years from a normal year, like a year ending in 1, where you expect to have your census numbers in? And that's a valid question. It's one that we might forward to future charter review commissions for consideration as a charter amendment. At this point, it's not on this year's ballot measures.
Thank you. So we have a question. The Amendment 9 statement mentions that another county that adopted a similar charter change, allowing only voters where the ordinance applies to vote on the initiative referendum. Do you know what county that was, and was the ordinance triggered by that change?
Yeah, it's King County, and it was a charter amendment. I don't recall which year it was passed. King County has had a number of charter amendment cycles in the last decade, but they do have Clark County's proposal is modeled after the language that's in the King County Charter. What I can't tell you, because I haven't asked about it, and I don't know if anybody in the county council has asked them, as to how effective or if how that provision has worked for King County. I have my own concerns, because what happens if you are an unincorporated voter, you sign a petition, it gets on the ballot, and then you get annexed. You'll no longer be eligible to vote on something you petitioned for. But I don't know if King County's had issues with that, and I don't know how the county council would propose to work with those type of issues if that passes.
Thanks. And also, there's another question. Who decides what an ordinance only applies? Who decides that an ordinance only applies in unincorporated Clark County? Proposal 10, for example, applies to the entire county to raise money for sheriff's office body cameras indirectly.
Yeah, I'm not quite the expert on that, but my understanding is the Justice Fund, which is the Juvenile Justice Fund, is a countywide tax that they can assess under state law. I don't think they can just assess it in the unincorporated area, because it make it inconsistent with how that fund or tax was created in the first place. And this is the concern I have, as well as I've heard from others on the other part of that question, is who is going to define that? How do you decide who's an unincorporated, or what ordinance applies only in unincorporated areas? I don't know. And there's no language in that amendment that talks about how that is done. Under other provisions within the charter now for initiatives and mini initiatives and referenda, the county's prosecuting attorney's office gets involved in some of those legal opinions as to whether they can be applied or not. And there's some provisions like adopting a budget or adopting zoning where you can't petition for an initiative or referendum under those. So it would be something that I would hope, if it passes, that the county council or the county manager works with the prosecuting attorney's office to adopt some administrative procedures as to how you answer all of that. Because to me, I agree with that question. I don't know how that would, who would make that determination. And I could see it being maybe a controversial decision, especially if you talk about fireworks. That has its own controversy, and that's the question.
Thank you. Let's move on to the Ethics Review Commission. How does it work? Who makes the appointments? Who is appointed? Do they get paid? All kinds of questions.
Wow, lots of questions. The intent, both that measure and measure 6, the intent that the majority of the commission, I can tell you, had was that those programs would be funded within the current general fund budget, that neither of these are creating a new bureaucracy, neither of these are creating a new tax. So the way the Pierce County, and I can tell that's probably the most similar model I have in my mind to this, the Pierce County model is they do appoint, I think it's either 7 or 9 commissioners that are appointed by the county executive, who in their case is elected. Our county manager is appointed. So their charter actually prescribes who can be appointed. In some cases, there's a couple of attorneys, there's a labor representative, there's representatives from geographies, and some at-large representatives. The expectation is those are volunteer appointments. However, the attorney positions, because of their expertise in ethics law, they are compensated for their time. Now, they're only compensated if they have a complaint they need to work on. It's not like they're an FTE and they're there all the time. Pierce County's budget for their ethics review office is $60,000 a year, and that's for the commission and the hearings officer that comes with it. Their average annual expenditures have been $14,000 to $15,000 a year, and again, it's pay as you go. If you took those numbers, like the $15,000, applied it to Clark County's general fund budget, it works out to 0.031% of the entire county's budget. So it's a very small number. The expectation that the commission has is that the offset is the prevention of stalemates like we had last year, as well as diverting time from the county's prosecuting attorney's office and the county manager's office to investigating these complaints, because they're being pulled off of other priorities. So there's an offset within that program. Same with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're looking at working within the existing county budget to fund the office, the manager of that department, and then the commission itself being volunteer.
Great. Okay. Now, here's a question about the DEI office, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Isn't establishing a new DEI office and commission just adding more bureaucracy to the county government?
Well, one point of discussion when we brought this up is we need to address diversity, equity, inclusion in Clark County. We're a little, and I think one of the misconception is what does that mean? And one of the topics of conversation that kept coming up is if we don't do this, if we don't start paying attention to this, Clark County is potentially opening themselves up to lawsuits for not addressing this. So what is the cost of doing it versus what is the cost of ignoring it? And that was one of the catalysts for folks to go ahead and push this onto the ballot. Now, it's one position is being created, honestly. So it's not a lot more bureaucracy. And one of the things I like to bring up is our minds automatically go to race. And that's an important part of this is, are we being equitable in terms of racial issues in Clark County? But this also addresses, are we looking at things with an equity lens for folks who have disabilities, for folks of different socioeconomic classes? I use the example of I'm on the Parks Advisory Board. We just started looking at which parks in Clark County are being built and in what neighborhoods. What is the median income in those neighborhoods? What are the racial demographics of those neighborhoods? Are we putting parks in place that have good ADA accessibility, that meet the needs of seniors? So DEI is all encompassing. You don't think about needing to come with that lens into parks. But it really touches on so many things that county government should be doing and should be doing in an equitable fashion. And this is just putting one person in place to make sure we're thinking of those things we've never thought before. And then it's also creating a commission to help the county create people with those lived experience to say, yeah, have you thought of it from this perspective before? So I would argue that it's not a lot more bureaucracy, and that the goal is to really save the county money because we're not looking at these issues. And if we don't, that will cost us in the future, most likely.
Yeah, the other thing is, I'm on the Commission on Aging, so obviously we have issues of equity as far as services, access to services, transportation, sidewalks, and things like that. The advantage that this commission has over the Commission on Aging is there's a provision in this amendment that each of the county council districts would have a representative on the commission. So you'd have not only representation across different equity stakeholders, but also geographic representation around the county. So what is an equity or a diversity issue in North County may not be addressed if you have a commission that's fully lives in the south part of the county.
So let me just clarify. There'd be a DEI office within the county, and that would be one staff person. And then there would also be a commission from. Yeah.
And so it's expected that the county manager would create the office, and she's committed, if this passes, the day after it's certified, that she would start working to establish the office, start working with the county council to establish a budget for the office, and then start looking for that person to manage the office. Now, the county manager, because this office would be under the program itself, would be under the county manager's office, they, or he or she, and now it's a she, could decide that, yeah, I need more support than one person. And the expectation is she would work with the existing, within her existing resources, because there are openings that the county continues to have, and policy analysts and other positions, to maybe find and reclassify positions to make sure that that office is fully supported.
And then the commission would be appointed similar to the other commissions that we have.
Yeah, to the Parks Board that Kelsey's on, the Commission on Aging that I'm on. It's volunteer. I can tell you, we don't get paid on those boards or commissions. We definitely don't get paid on the Charter Review Commission either.
We do a lot of unpaid work for Clark County.
Thank you.
Yeah, they don't even give us a sticker or a t-shirt or anything.
But it did cost us $25. It cost us $25 to file for office, so I guess it's a reverse compensation. But
All right, so that's all of the questions. Does anyone, we'll see if anyone else has a question. You can turn on your mic and ask. You can put it in the chat. I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to thank the League of Women Voters of Clark County for organizing this and sponsoring it. It's been lovely to work with them. I don't see any other questions coming up. Do you have any final thoughts, you guys?
Well, and I do want to point out a couple of things. Yeah, there was a question about why aren't there any real statements against in the voter pamphlet. There is a vote no group that's formed, and they're providing information, at least as to why they support voting no on all of the amendments, all 9 of them that the county that has put out there, county council and our commission. But the reasons for it are just not accurate. They're claiming that the 7 amendments that we put on the ballot are all by left-leaning Democrats, and that's just not the case. We don't have a commission full of left-leaning Democrats. We're nonpartisan. We might have a couple of people who are active with the Democratic Party or on the commission. I'm not, and a number of other members are not. We used to have somebody active with the Republican Party who was on the commission, and she would join early on. So that is just not an accurate statement. These are ones that were put on by people who are looking at this through a nonpartisan lens, through a community lens, as well as improving amendments to improve the charter, not necessarily left or right or anything like that.
And just to add on that, there's a charter yes campaign, and then there's a charter no campaign. And what I'm telling folks when they're asking me how they should vote, I'm saying, if you have the time and the resources to look into the issues, I think it's an oversimplification just to say yes to all of them or no to all of them. Mm-hmm. And so I'm encouraging people to ask questions, watch things like this, and really decide what's best for them instead of listening to just 2 groups telling you vote all yes or vote all no. Because again, that's just a way oversimplification of the work we've done since January. And, I really want voters to take a look at it, each individual amendment when they vote.
And I've gotten at least a couple calls a week from constituents who are asking questions about specific measures and are generally seeking information. I'm happy, and I'm sure Kelsey is as well, to respond to those, give them at least what we think are the facts of the different measures. We're not telling them how to vote. That's really up to them. But we want to make sure they have the accurate information on where these came from, what they mean, what would happen if they pass, what would happen if they don't pass.
Oops. Thank you so much for that. All right, Kelsey, any last minute thoughts?
No, that's okay. It. Thank you so much for having us.
Well, it's really important. The library is, believes it's very important to have an informed electorate. So we love having you guys come and talk about things like this. We appreciate the League of Women Voters bringing us programs like this. And I will say again, we have recorded this conversation, and so we will be posting that to our YouTube channel. Hopefully by Monday, we'll have it up with captions. I remind you all to look at our online calendar for other future virtual programs. We're going to have a program in November with the League doing a Speak Up School about how to stand before a commission, for example, and make your voice heard. So that dovetails nicely with all of this. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you guys for being here. I'm going to turn off the recording and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.